Job losses are everywhere in the news right now, and a lot of those headlines blame AI as if automation is finally coming for everyone's job. But are companies really able to replace large amounts of their workforce with AI? Well, the short answer is not really, and not yet. But that hasn't stopped many companies from trying, and then boasting about it, until they have to quietly rephrase their dilemma. Take UPS, for example. Over the last year, they've cut 34,000 operational roles and another 14,000 managerial roles. Did this have anything to do with AI? Well, it wouldn't seem so, but here's what UPS had to say about it.
We launched our Efficiency Reimagined initiatives to undertake the end-to-end process redesign effort, which will align our organizational processes to the network reconfiguration, whatever that means. My colleague Frank Holland found there was some AI-related job losses, but 34,000 were linked largely to closing buildings, right-sizing the staff levels, particularly in the wake of the online shopping boom from the pandemic.
Why do corporations insist on speaking like this? Anyways, it would seem like they are just simply cost cutting. If this has anything to do with AI, they're obviously reluctant to say so, which I'll circle back to in a moment. But obviously, UPS isn't alone. Amazon just announced 14,000 corporate layoffs. And while at first many speculated this had to do with AI taking over white-collar jobs, Amazon CEO Andy Jassy pushed back against this by saying the move was, quote, not really financially driven, and it's not even really AI driven. Not right now, at least. Instead, he attributed the cuts to company culture and overexpansion. In other words, he just felt like it. Now, these are just a couple of the more recent high-profile layoffs that have been reported on. But over the last year or so, several companies have been flat out bragging about laying off staff and replacing them with AI. That was until things got real, and they quickly learned AI wasn't cut out for what they needed.
Using AI and introducing it to save jobs turns out to be an enormously complicated and time-consuming exercise. I think there's still a perception that it's simple and easy and cheap to do, and it's really not.
Klarna, the buy now, pay later giant, is the perfect example. Their CEO celebrated in 2024 that the company's new AI chatbot was doing the work of roughly 700 employees, calling it a breakthrough in efficiency. He even went on Bloomberg and said that he already believed AI was capable of doing all of the jobs that humans do. But by May of this year, he did a complete 180. According to Bloomberg, he told an audience at the company's headquarters that the AI-driven customer service cost-cutting efforts had gone too far, and that Klarna was planning to now recruit employees back. Funny how that works, right? But then there was Duolingo, the language learning platform which announced back in April that it was implementing an AI-first strategy. They alluded to cutting a large portion of their freelance translators, saying AI would take over more of the language generation work. But soon after that, there was massive backlash online from users, and their CEO had to once again walk back the comments he made, claiming he didn't give enough context in his initial announcement and said, quote, "We have never done a layoff. We have not laid off a single full-time employee. This just hasn't happened." I think these examples make it clear. Companies aren't actually replacing humans with AI, at least not successfully. They're just trying to cut costs and test limits. Then, when it blows up in their face, which it inevitably always does, they have to walk it back. This is because investors want to see a return on all of the billions of dollars being invested in AI. So, on one hand, if a company can brag that they've fired thousands of workers and replaced them with AI, the C-level executives think that will boost their stock price. But on the other hand, this makes them look pretty bad to employees and most of the general public. But with all of that said, though, there's now a new narrative forming in the corporate landscape. Learn how to use AI or you're fired. Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture, which is a giant consulting agency, told investors that, quote, the firm has trained about 70% of its roughly 779,000 employees in generative artificial intelligence fundamentals. But employees for whom reskilling based on our experience is not a viable path will be shown the door, Sweet said. That's the equivalent of the CEO saying, if my employees don't Google this, they're fired. I love how it's now become like a threat. You better use it or we'll fire you. We can't have all these billions and billions of dollars go to waste on something that might actually be vaporware. Now, zooming out on the broader economy, the government is still shut down, at least during the making of this video, and it's been well over a month without any official economic data. So lately, we've had to rely on private data to get a sense of what's really going on in the economy, and more specifically, the labor market. This week, ADP reported that private employers added 42,000 jobs in October, after losing 29,000 the month before. But here's the catch. Every bit of that job growth came from companies with 250 or more employees. Small businesses, on the other hand, lost 34,000 jobs, which backs up what I said in my previous video, that small businesses in America are getting absolutely crushed right now. Now, even though Wall Street treated that headline as a pleasant surprise, the optimism didn't last long. That's because another report dropped almost immediately, and it painted a very different picture. Employment firm Challenger Gray and Christmas reported over 153,000 job cuts during the month of October. This was the highest October on record since 2003. On top of that, they also said hiring slowed to the lowest levels in 14 years. They said the number one reason for this was cost cutting, but the second most common reason was AI. Now, there's a lot to read between the lines in that report, because what's happening right now definitely goes way beyond just AI. The economy is experiencing a perfect storm of cost pressures from inflation, much of it driven by tariffs and economic uncertainty, which then in turn makes companies more cautious, and as a result, we get an economy that's hindered by stagflation.
Many people are losing confidence in the job market. A new poll shows nearly half of U.S. adults say they're not confident they could find a good job right now. That's up 10 points from last year. Rising prices for groceries, housing, and healthcare remain top concerns. 54% said the cost of groceries were a major source of stress for them. 36% felt that way about electricity bills. Experts say tariffs and federal layoffs added to the pressure, and that has slowed hiring and kept inflation high. Right now, 68% of Americans describe the economy as poor, and most say they're holding steady, not getting ahead.
Now, just because I think that many of these jobs won't actually be replaced by AI, doesn't mean these companies won't try to gaslight us into thinking that they are, or that they can be. Of course, companies will do everything they can to try to cut headcount, especially while the economy is in a downturn. Just as long as it's not the C-level executives being laid off, they really don't care. I think the hubris from many of these executives is on full display here. And if they could lay off 99% of their workforce and still collect their exorbitant bonuses, they would, just to enrich themselves even more. The funny part is, no one seems to have the foresight about what this could mean for their business if all of a sudden a large portion of the population is unemployed. Who will then buy their products or services? Will it just be the ultra-wealthy propping up the economy? I mean, I'm sure you've heard the recent stat that the top 10% of Americans make up roughly half of all consumer spending now. I mean, do these companies want the top 10% accounting for 90% of consumer spending? The answer to that is probably. But I'm also not naive to the fact that many of these businesses simply don't care, as it's right on par for them to break something first and then ask for help from the government later as they scramble trying to put it all back together. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you want to learn why small businesses are being crushed right now, but for some very different reasons, then I suggest you check it out in this video here. Thanks so much for watching.